One of the missions of Spark is to introduce you to trailblazers and thought leaders who, they're already reimagining their expos and events. And so we've got a great guest for this session. And I want to introduce you to Nicole Hallada, who joined the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, or AEM, in 1997, back when it was still the Construction Industry Manufacturers Association, as a marketing coordinator, rising to her current role as Senior Vice President of Exhibitions and Marketing in 2020. In between there, she served in numerous marketing and leadership roles within AEM, including twice as show manager of the Utility Expo, formerly known as ICUEE. In her current role, Nicole leads exhibition management, digital services, operations, strategy, planning, and marketing for all exhibitions, and serves as liaison to AEM service group members. Nicole has also lent her talents to a number of associations and organizations throughout her career, including Tempo Milwaukee, Destination Imagination, Project Lead the Way, NASA's Space Race Competition, and the American Society of Association Executives, while occasionally coaching her daughter's sports teams for the Big Bend, Vernon, Wisconsin Recreation. Nicole, welcome to Spark.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know last year in March, when things were really unraveling, I think the entire meetings and events industry was holding their breath, wondering what was going to happen with ConExpo, ConAg. And so I think a lot of us were wondering what was going on behind the scenes. So I'm very anxious to hear what was going on. I'm sure you guys were like ducks paddling under the water. So tell us.
Well, we were, first to maybe set the stage for your listeners, kind of for people who may not know, ConExpo ConAg is the largest construction trade show in North America that takes place once every 3 years. So it's a lot of planning because it's over 2.7 million net square feet and about over 130,000 attendees. And so to not have the show, that's a really big impact to our industry. And so we wanted to make sure that we were heading into that with all the information that we had available to us, given what was going on. But as you and I were talking before we went live here, I had said, I haven't spoken about this since we went through that. And I said, this may be more therapy for me than anything, given how difficult it was. But I would say about 3 to 4 weeks out, things started percolating. And so nobody really knew what was happening. You heard things. It was primarily off the United States shore, so it was in other countries in terms of this pandemic. And I had pulled a team together because at that time I was really focusing on marketing and wondering where the attendees were going. But we had heard exhibitors saying they weren't sure if they could come, and that was primarily in China. And then it moved to Italy. And so we started meeting once a day, and then we started meeting twice a day. But about 2 weeks out, it became very heightened. And I think we all in the team probably have our moment where it really hit us square in the face that we were dealing with something that we hadn't experienced professionally before. For me, it was when our social media manager came in and said, someone tweeted the President of the United States about our trade show relative to the pandemic. And, your jaw just hits the ground. Not that anyone can't tweet the president. I'm sure that happens all the time, but that someone thought to relative to an event taking place. And so, at that point, we established a more formal crisis communications team, and we took up residency in a conference room in our building, in our office. And that really was comprised of 4 individuals. Myself, another SVP, our president, and then our communications director. And we really needed to be together to make decisions very quickly and to roll out our messaging to the media, to show attendees, to exhibitors, to other key stakeholders. And so that was just really valuable for us to be together, to read the room, to see what was going on with each other. And that went on for about 2 weeks. And I can tell you, like the behind the scenes thing of it was that we stopped eating, we stopped drinking. You don't even go to the bathroom. You're like, you're in this room, and then you you escape, you go home, maybe you feed a kid, you take a kid somewhere, you pick right back up. And we did that until like 11:30 at night. And then the first thing we would all do when we woke up was 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd roll over, you check the news, and you would text your crisis team about what you were hearing or what you were thinking. And every time you did that, somebody was on the other end responding. We slept maybe 4 hours a night for 2 weeks. And so, yeah, I had worked on tracking everything because you just didn't know where it was going to end up.
Right.
Our constituents, our stakeholders are telling us that based on the data that we had been tracking, they felt comfortable having the show. And, I would spend time with the Southern Nevada Health District, understanding where the state was at. And there were no known cases at the time in the state when we had started putting our advanced team on the ground, and even as of show open. And so I had tracked everything that we did, just so we had good reference. And that was single spaced. In the end, when we wrapped it up, it was 22 pages long, single spaced,
Wow.
Date and time stamped everything that we did. And so, it was professionally and personally, it was quite an endeavor and a really great teamwork experience, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, well, definitely. You went through the fire and you survived.
Right, we did.
So when the show was actually happening and you had to keep everybody who was there, I mean, not just your team, but you had to keep everybody up to date. And then you actually shut down a day early. I think for me, that was the day that I knew things were not good. I mean, there'd been shows canceling and stuff, but when ConExpo ConAg closes down a day early and everybody goes home, that really made it real. So tell us a little bit about what that was like. And I don't want to dwell too long on all this. I want to move on to what you've been doing since, but just tell us, what was your communications like there on the ground in Vegas?
So I could say getting to the show was the most difficult. Making the decision to shut it down, and that communication was far easier in terms of just the logistics of it. But what had happened is, I remember walking down a hall and hearing, I don't know if it's on my phone or whatever, that the NCAA had shut down. And to me, that was then a no-brainer. It would be difficult to more information had come out. It was spreading quicker, and we wanted to be on the right side of history. And no event was worth making people feel like they had been exposed or compromised. And so we made that decision Thursday night, I believe. And Friday, we worked to, on the ground, walking 2.7 million net square feet. We walked to every board member, myself and my colleague, Megan, to tell them what we were thinking, to see where their heads were at. And then everyone supported, we don't really want to because it's really going great, because a lot of people did show up, but they understood that for the health and safety of everybody involved, that was the right thing to do. And so we had put messaging out through the channels and through the tree that we had established coming into the show, and got that messaging out with the support of our board.
So you actually won some communications awards for your crisis communications during that time, correct?
Yes, we did.
So what were
So those? It was an ASAE Gold Circle Award that we had won, that our lead communications senior director had put in for, and she detailed out everything that we did. And it's kind of, summarizing everything I'm talking to you about right now, bringing together that crisis team, having a room where we spent like every day from sun up till sundown, creating a communications tree, tracking our messaging, a lot of personal one-on-one communication, and staying ahead of any concerns people might have within all the audiences. So you've got your board, right. You've got your attendees, your media. And so there were messaging to each of those people, groups, to make sure that they were fully informed. Transparency was critical. We just lived and died by transparency. We wanted everyone to know where our head was at any given moment. So they had trust in us. That was really important to us. We wanted to have a lot of integrity around the decisions that we were making and make sure that our stakeholders were involved in that. But if I can share with your audience, like a little segue, you didn't ask me about this, but for anyone who ever goes through something like this, I would tell you that the logistics and the operations of making a decision on what to do on a day-to-day basis in a crisis like this, that's probably the easier part. What was the most difficult thing was the rumor mill. And if you ever find yourself in a crisis situation, that's really the biggest challenge. And so that's when the day-to-day communication is critical, in that personal one-to-one, because people will call and say, I heard the show's not happening. And we're like, what? We never talked about that. Or so-and-so isn't in the show, or all these people aren't coming. And so we'd buy into it for a little bit, like, what? We call these people, and no, that's not happening at all. And so proactive against preempting kind of rumors is really critical.
Well, that's a really good point, because that is the hardest thing to control, is the rumor mill, because you have no idea where it's all coming from.
Right.
I know you've done a lot since then too. And obviously ConExpo ConAg is only once every 3 years. You've got a lot of other shows within the AEM family. So you've got a lot of shows that you've been managing and audiences that you've been working with. So talk about how your communications have evolved through all of this, and what you're doing, and how you're kind of reinventing as you go along.
Sure. So first, I just want to acknowledge the people out there who maybe didn't get so lucky. I mean, our industry is really, everyone's who came after us has had a really big struggle. And I see you, I know that's difficult. And I'm happy that we're coming back around. So for us, after that, we had only one show that we had to take online and not hold in person. And that was a relatively small show. And so we were lucky in that way. But ironically, before coming into this pandemic, I was coming into this role as of January 1, 2020. And
wow.
Lucky me. And here's your pandemic. And so I had wanted to do a strategic plan just to kind of figure out where we needed to go. And so we had put that planning in place to do that. And so when we came back from the show, it took us a little bit because we couldn't meet in person, but we ended up having our strategic task force meet and chart out where they thought events needed to go. And, obviously with the pandemic and digital and things like that, that provided a lot of color into that plan. And so, we've got a really solid outlook on where we think we want to go, providing a lot more opportunity to the exhibitors to connect with their customers by leveraging, the database of attendees that we have for them in a more 365 way, providing more data and insights to exhibitors that we know they would find to be valuable. So we've got a number of things in the queue that we're working on. Given the time we find ourselves in with things changing and things like that, we're taking more of what we're calling an MVP approach, was a minimal viable product. And so we're really finding ourselves needing to be in a test and learn environment and being really agile. And so being comfortable with having an idea, testing it and saying, yeah, 50% of that was great. 50% of that wasn't great. What would we do different? Is this still the route we want to go? And so adapting our workforce to start to embrace that thinking is really how we're focusing right now.
And I think that's so key. And that's one thing I know a lot of organizations have a really hard time of taking that risk. And like you said, experimenting and trying new things and saying, well, this worked, this didn't work, and kind of reimagining and reinventing as you go. So kudos to AEM for taking those brave steps and doing that. You mentioned your strategic task force. Talk a little bit more about that. And I think you also did some surveys as well to really get a read on what people were thinking.
We did. So our strategic task force is comprised of exhibitors and attendees. I think as our membership at AEM is the exhibitors, the OEMs, equipment manufacturers in construction and agriculture. And so we have a history of really leaning more into that than the attendees. And so I want to make sure we had attendees on there. And so we did work with an outside group to walk us through that strategic planning process. And we looked at 10 points for consideration, and we had them prioritize that. We did this all virtually, and we used a lot of technology to do your typical Post-it note exercises and things like that. And so as they prioritized it, now I'm taking those paths and working with our team to make it come to life. And then circling back with the task force to say, okay, this one vertical you gave us direction on, here's our answer to that. Here's how we would do it. Is the touching base? Is this still the route you want to go? What are we missing? Is this great? Where would you change this? And so we're touching base with them along the way. And then what was the second part of your question?
Oh, it was how the task force was assembled and what they're doing and how you're bringing it all together.
Yeah, so we're just touching base with them, going in front of our board, making sure that they're coming along with us to understand that eventually there could be investment that's required. So a lot of it is communication again, to make sure that we're bringing people along with us on the journey, that they understand the why, where we need to go in order to maintain that AEM's trade shows continue to be best in class.
Well, and on that, what shows do you have coming up later this year, and how are you reimagining those? I know you said you're doing a lot more of the 365 leveraging, which I think everybody either should be doing or is already doing. So what are some of the things that you're doing to reimagine these shows coming up for later 2021?
So I remember the second part of your question. It was about the surveys
yes.
you're doing. And so, yes, so I am a professional pandemic sentiment tracker now. And we do have an event coming up in September. It's the Utility Expo, formerly known as IQ, or the International Construction Utility Equipment Exposition. And so, of course, all year it's been like, is this going to happen? And so we've turned to a lot of data. A lot of our partners who've been really stepped up to provide value beyond their original scope. I have one group that's brought together other executives to meet once a month, and this group has really leaned on each other to talk about various topics. And some of these groups are providing data to us. One of them in particular has been tracking the sentiment to get back to live events. And so been looking at a lot of indicators like that. And our industry, we're very fortunate, is extremely positive about getting back together. And our event is kind of known as the Demo Expo, which means a great majority of that exhibit space is outside. And so we're super unique in that way. And because of that, we feel really confident. And so I believe the data said something like, in any given year, and I could be getting this wrong, but the gist of it is, any given year, about 80% of people, when asked, will plan to return to your event. That, it was good, I will come back. So when they surveyed them, their most recent one, 85% said they were prepared to go back to live events. And so we continue just to share that information out with our exhibitors, because we want them to feel comfortable that they should stay in the event. We also surveyed our attendees and asked them specifically, and this was back like in February. So it's, it changes week to week. So it's month to month. So think back to February. In February, we had over 90% say they were coming, and a large amount saying they were bringing more people. So with these two bits of information, plus all the other information out there in that ecosystem, we felt really confident. And right now, I mean, we're 104% sold outside.
Wow.
We're 95% to goal in the indoor exhibits. And our registration is tracking in line with our 2017 show. Honestly, what's tracking a little bit behind is the exhibitor attendance. And we've had a difference in how we're doing that registration. So we're really tracking on pace with where we've been in the past. And so we're really excited about it.
That's really amazing. And like you said, things are changing constantly, and I'm sure that there'll be more people signing up as we go through the summer as well. So what about the actual show itself? Any different elements that you've added or adapted for the, I hate to say the new normal, but this new era, the trade shows 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever we're in now?
So I have to say that early on last year, when we were going into another event, one that we ended up not holding, we created a health and safety task force of our key staff that would have the greatest connectivity to operational things that we would want to consider for health and safety precautions. And because it's changing every day, those decisions are going to be made closer. For example, Louisville, where we're going to be having our event in September, they just last week completely opened up. And so we are tracking it weekly, but until we get a little bit closer, it would almost be a little premature to say exactly well, you should do this protocol, because it could be entirely different. But of course, we're going to have hand sanitizer. We're going to continue to advocate for, distance as much as you're able. We're pushing harder than ever on not having people standing in lines. So all the no-brainer things that would make sense, but in terms of any really big precaution, because we are outside, because the city has opened up, we're going to wait to see what makes the most sense for everybody who plans on attending.
Well, and what about adding a virtual component? Are you going to have virtual elements as well?
So actually, before this happened, our education director had planned on doing a hybrid version of our education. So she's just continuing on with her plan that she had from 2 years ago, which, kudos to her for being so progressive. So yeah, we will have education online. We've chosen at this point to not do what people are calling trade shows online. My background is marketing, and I struggled right out of the gates feeling that some of the solutions that were out there were adequate enough. I just don't think you can replace the face-to-face in the technology solutions that are currently out there. So, when we look at how we're going to connect people 365, clearly it's going to have some sort of online component, but it won't be that virtual trade show. It's more about content and connecting the exhibitors with the attendees through maybe sponsored content or different new product launches, things that I think lend themselves better to virtual. So you won't see a virtual trade show out of us anytime soon, but we do recognize that there's a huge opportunity online, and that's why we brought on a digital media component, I think about 3 years ago, that we continue to grow and nurture. So for Utility Expo, it's going to be that hybrid education. And for ConExpo, ConAg, we're going to be a little more aggressive with that minimal viable product, expanding that hybrid approach. So you'll see more out of us on ConExpo, I think.
Well, and you've got the time to really ramp up and do that, because, with a 3-year cycle, you're just a third of the way through it. So you've got a lot of time to still innovate and reinvent that show. So we'll be anxiously following to see how that one evolves. Any final thoughts, Nicole? Anything that, that you really want to leave people with about how to really look at things going forward?
Going forward, I would say, I think you should lean into your stakeholders. And by that, I mean, assemble a group to ask where their heads are at around trade shows, so that you're keeping pace with their expectations. I think a lot of people think, the world's different now and we should do things online more. But the reality is that's a distribution channel that, you should utilize in a toolbox of many other tools, and making sure you're aligning your distribution with maybe your product or your value proposition is going to be key. And so I think the more you can stay in contact with the people that you're assembling at these events, the better off you're going to be long term. And that might be scary. You might hear some things you don't want to hear, or who knows what they might share with you. But I certainly wouldn't ignore that. I think you have to lean into it.
Well, I think that's great advice, because like you said, even if it's not what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear, and how you need to resculpt your show as you go forward. So Nicole, thank you so much for being part of Spark. We really enjoyed getting to hear some of that behind the scenes thought process and how everything came together for you guys. And obviously you did manage a horrible crisis in as best a fashion as you possibly could. So kudos to the team at AEM, because I think you guys did a fabulous job. So anyway, Nicole will be in our Spark Lounge later, so that you can sit down at a virtual table with her. And if you've got more questions, you can ask her those in a video chat. So Nicole, thanks again for being one of our guest speakers at Spark.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our time.